Welcome to the DMF. I am your host, Justin Yachts, and today is part 4 of my interview with Randy James. Enjoy. All right, so let's talk about James Franco. When you met him, as you met him at an early point in his career, how did that come about?
He was in an acting class with a young actress who we actually didn't represent, but she was friendly with one of my partners, and she had seen him in class and suggested that we should meet with him. And again, we're in the talent development business, and he was a young actor. I think he at the time was like 18 years old. So we had him come in, and it was clear he was something very interesting about him from the minute he walks in a room. There's that thing, that where you can't take your eyes off of somebody. You don't know what they're going to do next. We asked him to come back and do a scene for us, which he did. I don't think I'm talking out of school. I think he would certainly admit this. It wasn't the best performance in the world. It was what I would call green. He hadn't been doing this very long. He was studying acting. He was a young green actor, but he had that thing that we talked about earlier where, there was something special about this guy. There was something fascinating about him. And you didn't want to take your eyes off of him because you didn't know what he was going to do next. So we decided to take him on and started sending him out. And in the beginning, it was a slow process because he was inexperienced, but the good casting directors recognized the same thing in him that we did. And so they were open to bringing him back. And he did a couple, little jobs here and there that were some, not significant work, but enough to get him on sets and working with other actors and working with directors. And I'll tell you, I think a young actor, I've always said, working a week on a movie or on a good television show is worth 6 months to a year in acting class, because you're hopefully working with super talented people, and your talent is able to grow exponentially from that experience. And so he had a couple of those experiences, and then he went in on Freaks and Geeks, the Judd Apatow NBC show, and he was absolutely perfect for the character that he was cast in. And the show didn't really catch on. I think NBC. I don't think NBC really knew what to do with this show. It didn't really fit into the NBC ethos, I don't think, I mean,
it was
today,
like
all the streamers, I think a show like that would have taken off on Netflix, but it just, I don't think it was a network show. And so for whatever reason, the show didn't stay on the air too long. But my gosh, I mean, look at the people that have come out of that show and gone on to, amazing careers, So then from that, he got the role he was born to play, which was James Dean. And I thought he just killed that. I mean, from the first moment that he came on screen in that movie, I believed I was watching James Dean. I didn't think I was watching an actor playing James Dean. And to his credit, I've never known an actor that's thrown himself into a role to the point that he would do it. I mean, he's taken the whole concept of method acting to a whole other level. I mean, he did a movie with Robert De Niro called City by the Sea, where he played a drug addict who, living on the streets, and it was De Niro's son. And he went and lived homeless on the streets of Venice in Los Angeles for like 2 weeks. And literally was panhandling on the street. People were giving him money and everything. I mean, it's wild, but he threw himself into this James Dean character. Watched every bit of film, every interview James Dean ever did, read every book on him, and he just killed it. And I think he won the Screen Actors Guild award or the Golden Globe Award. It's been several years. You'll be able to figure that.
I believe is the Golden Globes, because this was a television film, correct?
Yes, yeah. And that performance really that put him on a lot of people's radar, and then he had a great run after that, and then eventually, was nominated for Best Actor for 127 Hours.
Yeah, he was great in that. It was a great film.
Tough film to watch, but it's the true story of a guy who goes hiking in Utah and falls into a crevice and gets his arm jammed in the rocks and eventually has to cut his own arm off. And I'll tell you, I went to the screening of that, and that scene, people were literally walking out of the theater because they couldn't watch it. But it was pretty dramatic.
Another role that he did was really well was Spring Breakers.
Yes,
that could have been such a forgettable character, so paint by numbers, and he brought like this certain depth to him. There's the part where they're like playing with the guns and they're like, we'll just shoot you or whatever, and it's like there's this twinge of fear, there's this twinge of that. I thought that was I was upset when he didn't get nominated for that, because I was like, that was a really interesting performance. Talk a little bit about Jenny Garth and working with her.
Well, that's an interesting story. I had just left ABC and started this new company, and one of the guys that was a VP at ABC and that I had worked for some time, his wife was, if I remember the story correctly, was childhood friends with a woman who was putting on a beauty pageant in Laughlin, Nevada, a beauty and pageant and talent that had a talent show component to it. And all the judges that they were able to get at this beauty pageant in Laughlin, Nevada were like, used car salesmen from Laughlin, to come in. And so this guy called me up, and I had worked for him for many years, and said, listen, would you do me a favor and come to Laughlin and be a judge at this for my wife, because they need to have at least one legitimate person there. Here's my dog, Sebastian, making his podcast. And because this man was very good to me at ABC and was a friend, my wife, Kelly, and I got on a plane and flew to Laughlin, Nevada. And to your listeners who probably never heard of Laughlin, Nevada, it's this little town on the Colorado River that exists solely because they have gambling there. And it's sort of like, I guess, if Reno's a poor man's Vegas, Laughlin's a poor man's Reno. That puts it in perspective. And so we were there for a couple of days, and Jenny had won another pageant in Phoenix, some little, pageant. And she, based on her talent, she was a dancer, an aspiring dancer. And she came out and she did a modern dance number. And it was actually my wife, Kelly, who said to me, she's a really cute girl, but she doesn't really look like a pageant girl. But there's something really unique and likable about her. You should see if she has any talent as an actress. So I went and met the mom and met Jenny, and I happened to have an audition scene with me. And I asked her if she had any interest in doing this. And, they'd never really thought about it. But they were certainly open. And I gave them the scene. I said, work on this tonight. You don't have to have it memorized. Just be yourself. Just read. I'll read with you. You read the lines however you think, was a scene for a girl her age. And we'll do it tomorrow. And she came in and we did it the next day. And again, like James, she was very green. but she had an innate talent, and there was really a likability and a warmth to her. And I suggested to her that and her mom, if she would get into an acting class back home in Phoenix, and every few weeks or so, send me. I'll work with the acting teacher. Maybe I'll send an audition scene or something to the teacher, and have the teacher put her on videotape. This is back in the days of videotape, and send them to me. And we started this process, and it went on, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year, and the tapes got better and better and better. And there was a point where I said to Jenny and to her mom, look, I actually think that she's good enough now, if you guys want to do this, that she could compete in this market. And in those days, because there weren't self-tapes, everything was, you had to go in and read for someone. It meant they had to pick up and move from Phoenix to Los Angeles. So it was a huge commitment for that, a huge commitment for the mom. But they did. And they came out, and we started working together. And I would actually coach her on her auditions before she went in. And little by little, she started to get, a little job here and a little job there. And then she got a series with Barbara Eden called A Brand New Life that ran for one season. And she did a TV movie, incredibly, with Jason Priestley. I forget the name of it, like a cable movie. And then she went in and auditioned for 90210. And there was another show that was casting at the same time on NBC called, it was called Hollywood High. It was another teen high school show. And they were interested in, the first thing that happened is Jenny had read for the casting director on 90210. And the casting director didn't feel that she was right, didn't feel she was the right look. And I really believed that she was perfect for this. And I had a relationship with a guy who I had worked with at ABC named Tony Shepard, who then went on to be head of casting for Aaron Spelling Productions. He now works for Disney. But I called Tony and I said, listen, do me a favor. We're friends. I know I don't want to name the casting director, but she didn't think she was right, but I absolutely believe in this girl. Will you take 10 minutes and bring Jenny in and read her and tell me what you think? And he did. And he absolutely loved her. And he walked her down the hall from his office to Aaron Spelling's office and introduced her to Aaron. And the rest is history. But in the interim, Jenny was up for this other show, and there was a lot of interest in her in this other show, this NBC pilot. I really felt, and this was a risk, but I really felt that she should do the 90210. And I say it's a risk because at the time, although Aaron had such tremendous success with so many shows, this was a point in time where I don't even know if he had a show on the air. It was this period where he was struggling a bit, and Fox is a brand new network, unproven. This other,
you're right, it is Fox.
Fox. And this other show was an NBC, one of the top networks in the business. Until Fox came along, it was one of only 3 networks in the business. So it was a little bit of a risk, but they made the other pilot. Jenny did 90210. They made the other pilot. It didn't get picked up. And the rest is history. And she hasn't looked back, and she's still a client today. She just turned 50 years old, which is mind-boggling to me, because when we met, she was like 15.
Wow.
It's a little scary.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about Daniel Cosgrove. How did you discover him?
When at a certain point, when Jenny signed, as I said, talent deals on series go, 6 or 7 years. At a certain point the 90210 was still very successful, and our contract was coming up. And so we were going to renegotiate the contract. And one of the things that Aaron very graciously granted me and Jenny was the ability to sign off on any love interest that she was going to have on the show. And because there were a few guys that, were brought in for an episode or more than an episode that for one reason or another didn't really work out. And Aaron very graciously allowed us to have that. And so if they were interested in somebody to cast opposite Jenny, they would send us the choices, and we were able to have this creative input, which is, somewhat unusual, especially in an ensemble show like that. Jenny wasn't the star of the show, so a little bit unusual. And when we looked, Daniel was just coming off of a soap, All My Children, in New York. And when we looked at his tape, we absolutely fell in love with the guy. He was just obviously, ridiculously handsome, good looking, but there was a warmth to this guy and a likability that worked for the character. And Jenny just was naturally, there was like a connection that she had with him immediately when she saw the tape. And so when he came out, we all met, and he didn't have any representation at the time. I don't even know if he must have had an agent, but I don't remember. And I offered to represent him. I didn't do his deal for 90210, but once he came out, I took him on, and he's still a client today. And I just saw the trailer for the second season of Sex and the City. What's the reboot called?
Oh, well, and it is, or something, and I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And he's because he had a little role in that, and he's in the trailer, in the promo for the new season. But he's a great guy. I've worked with him ever since then, and now he's in his 50s, which I can't even wrap my head around.
Really? He's in his 50s too.
But I'll tell you a funny Daniel Cosgrove story along those lines, is that before he got into acting, he was a bailiff in Connecticut in like a local courthouse. Because he looked the way he did, I guess there were repeat offenders that would, on a regular basis be pulled into this courthouse to stand trial for some silly, misdemeanor or another. And they used to call him 90210. Because, everybody on 90210 was gorgeous and was, these handsome guys. And so they were sort of good-naturedly making fun of him because he was so good looking. And that was his nickname, and his bailiff nickname in the courthouse was 90210. And then a couple of years later, he ended up on the show, which is pretty crazy.
Because I remember him playing the villain in Van Wilder. With Ryan Reynolds there.
That was a great movie, and I thought
he was so good in that.
See, the thing that people don't know about him is that he's really funny. I mean, he's a really funny comedic actor, and I don't know if you've watched Billions, but he's been a recurring on Billions a few times, and there's a great scene of him getting out of a pool stark naked. These guys show up at his house to confront him, and he walks out of the pool.
Oh, that's him
from the back.
Oh, you're right. That's him.
Yeah. And he's so funny in that scene, but I thought he was in Van Wilder. He absolutely epitomized the jerk frat guy.
Yeah.
That exists in every school, I mean, funny stuff.
I thought he was perfect in that. I just love the way, the whole, it's such a funny film. You also represented one time Rachel Leah Cook, right?
For many, many years. Yeah.
Many years. Yeah. Talk a little bit about her. Or?
Well, she's one of the sweetest women I've ever known. She comes from Minnesota. And they grow them with good manners in Minnesota. And I've worked together for like 15 years and had a great relationship. She worked quite a bit during our time together, and I have nothing but wonderful things to say about her. There's not a kinder human being on the planet.
Corbin Burnson. To talk a little bit about Corbin, because you have a long history with him.
A very long history. Corbin, who people may remember from L.A. Law, played the sort of scoundrel divorce attorney Arnie Becker, and then from the major league movies with Charlie Sheen and Tom Berenger, the feature films. And Corbin's first wife was my assistant in New York. She was a model, but worked for a secretarial temp agency. And so when I first came out to New York, I didn't have, I hadn't interviewed anyone to be my assistant, and the network kind of assigned her to me. And she started dating Corbin, and I met Corbin through Brenda Cooper. She went on to win an Emmy for she was the costume designer on The Nanny, and came up with all of those amazing outfits that Fran Drescher became famous for. That was all Brenda's doing. That was all her eye. I think she may have won a couple of Emmys, but at the time she was my assistant at ABC. And Corbin, although we grew up in LA and his family was a show business family, his mother, Jean Cooper, played Catherine Chancellor on The Young and the Restless for almost 40 years. She had, maybe still does, the record for the longest continuous role in television, playing that role on that soap 40 years. And his father was a producer, but he came to New York to, study acting, to learn the craft of acting. We became really good friends. And when I left New York to go to LA to start this company, he was one of the first people that signed with me. He came out shortly after I did. And he had actually auditioned for LA Law in New York. And it was in the dead of winter. And he tells this story, and it was cold and blizzardy. And he went in and he was sort of depressed, and he did the reading, and he didn't really, it didn't work. And then he came out to LA, and he tells the story. We got him back. We were able to get him back in and get him another shot, because they were not able to cast this role. And I mentioned earlier Joel Thurm's book. Joel Thurm at the time was the head of casting at NBC, and by coincidence lived next door to Corbin's godfather. Corbin was living with his godfather at the time because he didn't have his own place. And Corbin tells a story that he was jogging. It was a beautiful, bright, sunny day. He had this audition coming up for LA Law, his second chance. And he was jogging along Mulholland Drive, which is a windy road that goes along the mountains in Los Angeles. And a convertible Jeep with two beautiful girls drove down the street, and they yelled at him, hooted at him or whatever. And he said at that moment, he got who Arnie Becker was. He connected with this whole LA vibe that he couldn't connect with when he went in New York. And just, blonde-haired, hot dude, chicks love him. He had to play into that. And it was actors, actors have to seize on something that, the British style of acting is creating a character from the outside in, where the method, the Brando style of acting is you create a character from the inside out. And what the Brits do is they'll take something, a costume, they'll put on a mustache, they'll do their hair a certain way, and they create this character that way. And I think that was an example of that happening with Corbin, because he saw what this guy was based upon, running in a pair of dolphin shorts down Mulholland Drive and having hot chicks, yell at him and him flirting back and all of that. And so that made him be able to connect to this character. And he went in and he got the part. And it was just like Jenny in 90210, LA Law became this phenomenally huge show at the time. It was a really Stephen Bochco was the creator and the writer. That they brought on David Kelly, who's gone on to do such amazing shows like Boston Legal and so many others. And it was just really one of the smartest, well-written, well-directed, and well-acted shows at the time. And it was on NBC and just really made everybody on that show elevated their careers in a phenomenal way. And he's still he's standing on a set today shooting a movie. I mean, he works constantly. Yeah.
Okay, that about does it for this episode. I want to thank Randy James for his time. Please like, share, and subscribe, and consider checking out the YouTube channel. As always, you can find me at Justin Yachts, and I will see you next time on the DMF.